Hi, everybody. I'm Sage Cohen, and I'm looking forward to spending some time with you this evening, sharing my top 10 tips for making time your secret weapon. This is Valentino. My dog Machi is in the background, and we'll just hang out until everyone is with us. So hello, everybody. It's good to be with you. My name is Sage Cohen. I'm excited to be sharing my top 10 tips this evening about making time your secret weapon. I'll tell you just a little bit about who I am and what brings me here. I am the author of 4 books, 3 from Writer's Digest books, 3 books all about helping writers be successful and inspired and effective at their craft. My most recent is Fierce on the Page. I've also written The Productive Writer, Writing the Life Poetic, and the poetry collection Like the Heart, the World. I also coach writers, teach writing classes, and my day job actually is I make a living as a marketing writer. So a lot of the tips that I offer writers are kind of a convergence of my learnings from 20 years as a professional writer in the business world and, I don't know, probably 35 years as a practicing poet and essayist and fiction writer and writer of all other things. So that's kind of my background. I offer support for writers at sagecohen.com, and I will get started. So let's see. So years ago, I came across a little interview with the fiction writer Grace Paley. And the journalist said to her, "Grace, you're a mother, you're an author, you're a teacher, you're an activist. How do you do it all? How do you have time to make all of these things happen?" And Grace's response was, "Well, I have all day." And I was really delighted when I came upon this. That's become a mantra for me. Every time I get stuck in the loop of telling myself that I don't have enough time. Because the truth is, we all have the same amount of time. We all have all day, every day. And it's up to us how we make use of that time. And so my goal today is to share with you the best strategies that I know for making the very best use of the time that we have. And when we are clear about what we want to accomplish, when we commit to making the time that we spend writing really count, we're most able to produce more writing, create more satisfaction, and become the writers that we were meant to be. So I want to just make it clear that I'm going to focus on, for about 20 minutes, kind of sharing my tips, and I'm not going to be looking at the chat because that will make my thinking fragmented. So when I have finished sharing my tips, I will be really happy to hear from you and answer your questions. Okay. So tip number one, and this might seem obvious, but it's something that writers very often overlook, is have clear and specific goals. It's impossible to reach a destination that you haven't yet articulated, and then you don't know if and when you've arrived if you're not clear where you're headed. And because you can only be moving toward one destination at a time, it's important to clarify and prioritize your goals. So knowing what matters most to you in your writing life means that you can invest the time that you do have toward getting there. And this kind of clarity can be hugely accelerating. So for example, do you know that you want to write for an hour a day? Do you want to produce a series of teen vampire novels? Do you want to pitch an article to a magazine? Do you want to write the perfect poem and have Poetry Magazine publish it? The more specific you can be about what your goal is, then the more you can be effective about tracking how you're doing with that goal and kind of aligning your practices and your attitudes with reaching that goal. I have a friend and a colleague who had only 2 hours a week to write. And he was a stay-at-home father of 2 special needs children. And in 2 years, he used those 2 hours to write and produced a book that was acquired by the first publisher he approached and has since helped many, many thousands of families deal with their special needs children in really beautiful, profound ways. So what I take away from that and what I invite you to take away from that is that you too can change the world in only 2 hours a week, if that's what you have, if you're super clear about what you want and where you're headed. Okay, that's tip number one, know your goals. Number 2, move with intention toward those goals. Years ago, I was talking to a poet friend about his desire to be published. And he also mentioned that he had never submitted any poems for publication. And I asked him, so how many of those poems that you didn't submit have you published? And he looked at me kind of stumped and then started laughing and said, oh, right. If I want that, I need to be moving toward that. I need to be taking the risk to submit my work. And so that's what I invite you to do. If there's something that you want, make sure that you are taking the steps, that you know what the steps are to move toward that. So let's say you want to pitch a magazine article. What are the things that you need to do? What are the steps that you need to take? What's the deadline? Who's the editor? What are their standard word lengths? What are their submission and query processes? When are you going to write draft 1? Who's going to review it for you and give you feedback? Kind of having a picture of what the steps are to take to make those goals, to kind of manifest those things that you want. Even if you don't know all the steps to take, what's the next step? Focus on that. And then I highly recommend being accountable to someone other than yourself. So if you are shooting for a particular goal, you tell your best friend or your writing buddy or your mom, whoever it is, I promise to you that I am going to do this. And then you report back, I took this step. I did this thing. So that you are making promises to someone other than yourself, because one of the trickiest and most slippery slopes are the promises that we make to ourselves. We can be so much more effective when we've committed to somebody else. And then this is really important. Celebrate every success along the way. Everything you do, every step you take. Okay. Tip 3, write in your power hours. So notice, are you more effective between 5 and 6 a.m. or between 11 p.m. and midnight? And if you are so fortunate that you actually have those hours available in your life, or you can make them available, you're going to get so much more mileage out of using those hours where you really have energy for writing. So what I suggest is know what your prime time is. If you possibly can show up, have a practice of being at your writing desk or computer or station, whatever it is, during those hours. You're going to get a lot more mileage out of the time that you have. And then on the flip side of that, many of us have lives with many, many responsibilities and commitments. And if what you have available is time that is not your prime time, I challenge you to make it your prime time, to do what you can to make those hours that are not your natural rhythm really work for you. Okay, tip number 4, limit interference, especially your own. So if you pay attention to what your tendencies are when you're writing, you can manage them. So let's say you know that you tend to wander off into endless research when you only need a fact or two, or you can sink an hour into a social media forum where you could have left a quick comment. Kind of building a arsenal of strategies that help you manage those tricky and undesirable habits and distractions can really help you conserve time so that you can attend to your high stakes work. So for example, try setting a 5-minute timer when you're tackling a task that's not writing, or use an app that keeps you offline when it's writing time, or promise somebody, as I said before in the accountability step, promise somebody that you'll spend an uninterrupted hour writing and then report back when you're done. If you're an endless reviser, set a 3 revision limit. And basically keep experimenting until you find the strategies that really serve you best and help you stay on track. Another really great, one of my favorite strategies is to procrastinate productively. To have a list of things that you do when you are having a really hard time settling into work, but things that are going to move your writing life ahead. I generally sit down to write. I spend 10 minutes doing my productive procrastinations. I'll visit a social media group that's related to a topic that I am writing about. I will return emails that readers have sent with questions. I'll do things related to my writing life that move my writing life ahead, but that are not actually keeping my butt in the chair to do my own writing. And it kind of helps me settle down to give myself a little wiggle room to procrastinate. Okay, tip 5, master the margins. So I don't know about you, but I know and have read about a great number of people who have quit their job to write their masterpiece, spent a year or more floundering, and in the end produced nothing or very little. There's this sort of fantasy that when we have all the time that we could possibly want, that we're going to just miraculously produce those things that we've always wanted to produce. But in my experience, and in the experience of many students and coaching clients that I have worked with, and just writers in my community, it's actually can be far more powerful having slices of time and really having to make those times work. When we know we only have 2 hours, this friend of mine who only had 2 hours a week, he made that time matter. It added urgency and heightened his sense of expectation. And he got things done in that sliver of time. I have a friend, a colleague who reports that she wrote an entire essay collection while waiting at her kids' doctor's appointments over the course of a couple of years. So my own productivity quadrupled when I was a single mother of a toddler. So I want to invite you to challenge yourself to not deny those slivers of time that you have as unimportant or unmanageable, but to really see what can you, so if you followed all the steps up to now, you know what your goal is, you know what the next step is. Could you take that step in the 5 minutes you have, in the half hour you have? What can you do to make every margin matter? And kind of along those lines, but a different slant is tip number 6, to remember that it's all your writing life. It's really easy to consider our non-writing commitments a distraction or a hindrance, but you can actually make these really purposeful and in service to your writing. For example, for me, my dog walk has been a huge, I've had at least 2 dog walks a day for the past 20 years. And this has become a kind of a sacred time of rumination and incubation for me, where it's something I have to do. My dogs have needs that I need to take care of. And then I sort of put that to work for myself, and tune into ideas and inspiration while physically engaged in something else. You can do this while you're sleeping, commuting to work, dishwashing, in the shower, standing in the grocery store. You can grocery store checkout line. You can eavesdrop on the people in front of you and borrow snippets of what they're saying for dialogue or plot. So what I'm saying is to make every minute count wherever you are toward the work that you ultimately produce. And this kind of attitude and approach, nap time. Yes, this kind of attitude and approach can really change your inner conversation and therefore your outer conversation, your experience of reality, from experiencing your non-writing time as time wasted versus time invested. And one thing that I highly recommend is always having something that's super easy for you to use to capture ideas. Whether it's a crayon in the shower wherever your kind of most high density idea time is, crayon in the shower for writing on the tiles. I've got one of those. Index cards in your note bag, or the recorder on your phone. Index cards are a big one for me. I have them everywhere. I have them in my dog walking purse, next to my bed, in every room of the house. And it's my way of sort of letting myself know that I'm going to show up for the ideas that come through. No matter what I'm doing, I'll take a few seconds or a moment to write things down and sort of keep in relationship with my writing life, no matter what I'm doing. So tip number 7, put a squirrel on the wire. I don't know if you can see behind me. I see in my camera my lovely old dog, Machi. Machi can barely walk, but when she sees a squirrel overhead on a phone line, she will pull me down the street after it. And that is what I invite you to be going for in your writing life, to discover what those irresistible motivations are that are going to give you the most bang for your buck when you are spending time on your writing. And if you're finding that you're sitting down to work on your project that you've decided is your most important project, but it's just not getting any traction, you keep wandering off and thinking about something else and wanting to write about something else, I invite you to just experiment with putting it on pause in favor of work that really feels more essential to you. And if you're finding yourself repeatedly drawn in a direction that you hadn't counted on, experiment with putting it at the top of your priority list and see what kind of momentum that gives you. So what I'm saying is, commit to what matters, but be willing to be flexible and experiment and see if you're on a path, is it the right path? Are you just charging ahead? Are you so compelled to explore this path that you just make every minute that you invest in it most powerful and effective? When we're honoring the truth of what calls us forward, that can give us liftoff, and it can bring unprecedented return to the time that we invest in our writing. Okay. Tip number 8, leave yourself a trail of crumbs. So when you are sort of signing out of a writing session, you want to do things that help you remember where you were, what you were thinking, and what you intend to do next. So whether it's a sticky note, when I'm in a computer document, I will kind of I have different systems for different things that I'm working on, but leave myself notes that say, I stopped here, I'm planning to do this next, so that when you sit down again, you can kind of get right into the mindset you were in when you left and have a feeling of momentum, and you're not floundering around, spending time trying to figure out where you left off and what's next. Tip number 9, track your time. This is a habit that has grown out of my business writing life. I have a time log. Every time I sit down to write anything, I log in and then I log out. So what this has taught me over time, I know how long it's going to take me to write a 1,500-word article. I know how long it's going to take me to generate a book proposal. I know how long it's going to take me to draft a book. Poems are a little more wiggly. So this kind of insight helps me decide what kinds of projects are reasonable and worthwhile to take on. So having a system for evaluating how you are spending your time, it also helps you see, wow, I sat down at 8, but I actually didn't start writing anything until 9 because I was wandering off, researching cherry blossoms when I needed an image for that piece. And so you get to sort of really understand where you're on track, where you're off track, how your time practices are moving you toward your goals or not. And then you have a lot of insight when you have an opportunity that you are considering, or if somebody offers you an opportunity, then you know whether it's reasonable. You can sort of picture, oh yes, I know that I have my 2 hours a week, and a year from now I can meet that deadline, or whatever it is. You get to understand your capacity, what your rhythm is. And finally, tip number 10 is to claim the time you need. So there's a quote that I love that says, your parents don't give you your independence, you take it. And the same is true in the writing life. We don't have bosses. We don't have teams of people that we work with. We don't have a social structure kind of moving us forward with our work a lot of the time. The world, when we decide we're a writer, the world doesn't say, how wonderful that you are a writer. I'm going to give you 3 hours off of your job every day so you can write. You need to take it. If you want writing time, it is your job to carve that time out of your life, to enroll your family or community in supporting you, to have other people handle dinner once a week, to hang mom or dad is not available while this sign is up on this door. If you're not bleeding, don't come in. To decide what writing time belongs to you and claim that time, cherish that time. Set yourself up to be successful in that time. And most importantly, to always remember that you have all day. So that is it for my tips. I am very happy to answer questions. I'm going to put on my glasses so I can read the small print. Any questions, folks? All right, well, let's see. So Brenda says she's going to start saying she has all day. Yeah, it's one of my very, very favorite practices. Just remembering when we get into that scarcity mindset of, I don't have enough time. Somebody once said to me, if you think about it, most of us wake up in the morning, get out of bed, and are thinking already about, I didn't get enough sleep. I'm not rested enough. We start our days in this sort of conversation with time about how we don't have enough. And I think when we give our attention to how sufficient we are, how sufficient our days are, and that it's just kind of up to us to really tap into that and make use of it, it can be very powerful. And Kathy, it sounds create a ritual, a writing ritual. Yeah, so yes and no. I feel like we're always kind of sort of riding that edge of groove and rut. So I'd say have a writing ritual as long as it's serving you, and always pay attention to when, we have ideas about ourselves that we outgrow. So when I was in graduate school studying poetry, my writing time was 4 p.m. to midnight. That's my time. And that's not what my life is like anymore, that I can't make use of that time. And so I found new rituals and rhythms that I can make work in the structure of life as a mother and a business person. So yes, my invitation is to experiment with what are the rituals that work. And the minute you feel that they are not, you notice that they are not moving you ahead, what else might you try? If you're a write alone in your bedroom under the covers kind of person, what would happen if you went to a noisy cafe or rode on a train? So Marissa, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks about stories in weird places. Weird places are the best places to think about stories, in my opinion. So Brenda, when life throws you curveball after curveball. Well, so I went through a period of quite a few curveballs. I got divorced when I had a 2-year-old. Sorry, I have a cat here stuck over here. And things were really, really, really hard in every possible way. And so I think my feeling is the curveballs, I picture them as kindling for the writing fire. I started inventing all of these writing projects I made myself sort of an alphabet. I called them the Rage Diaries. And I started with the letter A, and I would just, every day, okay, A is for, can't remember what A was for. C was for coyote. But basically found ways to sort of welcome those curveballs as opportunities for my writing life, no matter what they looked like, no matter how it seemed like they were derailing my writing life. And they certainly derailed certain parts, but I found ways to make them useful in other parts. So let's see. Brenda, did that answer your question, or can I be more specific about, if you want to share a little more about the curveballs, maybe I can be more specific, but hopefully that gives you some ideas. Let's see. Mayor, Robin, make your bed because it starts your day with a completed task. Yeah. It's really interesting. There's a lot of, so here's another piece of, I don't even want to call it advice. It's an invitation that I think is the most important thing in the writing life is listen to the experts when what they have to say resonates with you. Or if what they have to say doesn't resonate with you in a way that it feels, challenging and interesting and sort of brings you to a new kind of rigor. There are experts who say, make your bed to start the day, swallow the frog, do that hardest thing first. I have found that I don't like to do that I don't find doing the hardest thing first motivating for the rest of the day. I like starting my day with whatever delights me the most. And then that gives me this feeling of sort of overflowing, I feel grounded and happy and excited about the things I have to do. So my invitation to you is, if you try something, if I've offered you something here and you try it and it doesn't work, try something else. I mean, what experts are sharing generally is what has worked for them and maybe what has worked for the majority of the people that they serve. But that doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So your job is to become the expert of you and to have a relationship with time that is authentic to you. I also thought that, William Stafford and all kinds of other writers and poets who I really admired woke up early and wrote And that's just not my thing. And I tried it. I tried it. I think it's very valuable to try and see who you are as a writer. And the more you know and honor about who you are, the more momentum you're going to have. Let's see. Getting your best ideas at bedtime. Yeah. So that's a great practice. Nancy talks about getting her best ideas at bedtime and she writes them down. I think my feeling is that whatever you call it, the muse or inspiration or those ideas that come through, when they know they can count on you to show up, you're going to get a lot more information coming through. So if you have a practice of honoring and receiving what is available to you, in my experience, so much more opens up in that space. Yeah, Brenda. So curveballs are jumping off points. I think, so this is something that I learned. I have a project called Radical Divorce, and it's I'm focused on helping parents move from divorce to happily ever after 2.0. And one of the things that one of the discoveries I made in that work, I think really translates to the writing life too, of course, because it's all our writing life. But it's that if we take what we're used to interpreting as obstacles and obstacles that we have to get through, and we instead look at them as opportunities that we get to grow through, then there's really no stopping us. Whatever it is that is challenging your writing life, that is limiting your time, that is making it hard to achieve your goals, that they're opportunities to know yourself better as writers, to dig deeper, to find new ways forward. If one way doesn't work, try a new way. There's really no end to the story until you decide it's the end. So as long as we're saying, well, that didn't work, what else am I going to try? We can keep finding the opportunity in any obstacle. And I have found that to be an incredibly generative way to live and write. I'm curious if Robin, making your bed has contributed, how you feel like that helps your writing life. I'm so curious. And I'm curious about other strategies that folks have for, what works for you in managing time. What have you learned about yourself, about how you are most effective in using your writing time? Any tips that you all want to share about what's going well for you, or a time that you got stuck and found your way through a tricky spot? Oh, I see someone mentioned a book. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Kathy. The Miracle Morning. Yeah. Brenda's saying she discovered she likes sleep more than doing the Miracle Morning. Yeah, I think it's just so important to experiment, because if we're showing up for, I have a colleague who's an incredible poet, and he makes himself sit at his desk even when nothing is happening, and he's convinced that's the way to do it. And it sort of doesn't matter to him that the evidence points to, there's no evidence that that's actually advancing his poetry in any way, but he'll just sit there because he committed to sitting there. So that is what he believes is working for him. To me, that's not my thing. I like to find ways to be excited to sit down to write, so that I'm not showing up and sort of feeling disheartened about what's going to happen there. Yeah, Robin. Okay, so completing a task and moving forward with your day. So that's another Thank you, Robin, for that point about completing. Oh, our time has run out. Maybe I'll say one more thing and in conclusion, which is that finding ways, even if it's the smallest part, let's say you're writing a book, but you've broken it down into all the steps, or you know what the first step is, to really give your attention to doing something fully and completing gives huge, huge momentum. All right, thank you, everybody. See, we're signing off. It was great to be with you. Bye.